VBT Productions. The MG mark has been synonymous with motorsport achievement for the past 85 years, and this is our account of competing at the 2012 Le Mans Classic with a 1931 MG M-Type, the original MG Midget. And here she is. As a classic car enthusiast and time-served Le Mans fan, I was delighted when the Le Mans Classic Series first appeared in 2002. Together with the usual VBT crew, we went along to all the events we could, but I often wondered what it would be like to actually compete there. The journey towards seeking the entry started in 2010 when I was again spectating at the Le Mans Classic with the usual VBT suspects. I was following the fortunes of a locally owned Austin 7 Speedy, and their team made me very welcome at the pit garage. I thoroughly enjoyed following the car's progress throughout the 24-hour period, and I returned home buzzing with excitement. A few days later, I was relating my experiences to a fellow MG enthusiast who happened to know of an MG Le Mans M-Type that hadn't turned a wheel for over 20 years. I immediately saw the possibility of turning this opportunity into the reality of a race entry, and it didn't take long for me to make my mind up to acquire the project. Restoration started in late 2010 and continued throughout the whole of 2011. I had no hesitation in asking Phil Cornett to undertake the task. Phil has a wealth of pre-war MG knowledge and was able to steer the project through to completion in March 2012. With the restoration underway, I needed to find a second driver and also upgrade my competition licence for use in France. The search for a second driver didn't prove too difficult, and I was soon joined by Robert Ellis, who also agreed to share the not inconsiderable cost. The need for a race licence upgrade was a great excuse to enjoy some vintage sports car club racing during the 2011 season in my 1935 MG Magnet. Our Le Mans Classic race entry was confirmed over the 2011 Christmas break, and I soon received offers of support and assistance from fellow VBTers and well-wishing friends. With a dozen or so supporters to accommodate, we found a gîte near La Chartre-sur-Loire, which would become our race team base for the weekend. The car was ready for shakedown testing in early 2012. Regular road miles were interspersed with competitive outings at VSCC's Spring Start at Silverstone and the Brooklands 12-12 Sprint. A few teething problems were dealt with, and for the final fettle we paid a visit to a rolling road where an impressive 45 horsepower was recorded. In the days running up to the off, we did our best to get organised by allocating various duties to the trusty support crew. Team manager was Captain Chris Menham, who wasted no time in handing out tasks for planning, logistics, catering, photography, etc. I was also grateful that Phil Cornett had agreed to come along and spanner for the team. Paula took up a customary role of assistant mechanic whilst also keeping us all in check. As we set off for France, we ran into some miserable weather, which was to set the scene for the weekend ahead. But at least the French rain was a little warmer than in the UK. We arrived at Race HQ on the Wednesday evening, just time for a quick beer and a barbecue before turning in ahead of an early start the next day. Thursday was set aside for signing on, driver briefing, scrutineering and settling into our Plateau 1 paddock, which would become our home for the next few days. The garage was a shared marquee setup, and we were sandwiched between two well-known racing MGs, both with Le Mans racing history. We set up shop and waited apprehensively for the scrutineers to arrive. Although other cars did experience problems, the Midget sailed through and we were issued with the all-important ticket to race. Friday's practice session was our first opportunity to gauge the car's true performance on the Le Mans track. We had little prior experience to go on, but set ourselves a target 10-minute lap. Taking to the track for the first time, I completed my 2 practice laps and was pleased with a lap time of 9 minutes 20 seconds or an average speed of 54 miles an hour. When I came into the pits, I swapped with Robert, who immediately dialed into the zone and finished his session with a lap time of 8 minutes and 45 seconds or 58 miles per hour. This was much better than we'd hoped for, but we were conscious of the need to play the long game and we agreed not to overstress the car. It rained on and off for most of Friday's practice, which resulted in the timetable slipping. And by the time our mandatory night practice session started at 1:30 on Saturday morning, the schedule was already running over an hour late. Although I was able to complete my 2 night practice laps, Robert's session was stopped before he could leave the pit lane. We weren't sure how this would affect us, as the regulations stipulated that all competing drivers must take part in the night practice session, otherwise they could not start the race. It would be 12 hours before we learned that this rule had been relaxed in view of the weather conditions. After the drama of night practice, we managed to grab a few hours sleep before returning to the paddock to prepare for race day. The race would start at 4 p.m. on Saturday, with our grid first due out at around 8 p.m. The atmosphere in the paddock throughout the day was electric, and the day flew by with many friends and well-wishers dropping by to offer support. Soon it was time for the first of our 3 race sessions. Each session would be around 45 minutes, including the mandatory driver change. For the start of the race, I decided to take the first slot, which also included the famous Le Mans start. Thankfully, that was just for show, as I managed to set off with the handbrake on and the driver's door swinging open. Once we got around to the Mulsanne straight, the marshals stopped us and reassembled the grid for the race start proper. Of the 68 starters, we had qualified 43rd, not too bad considering the opposition. I will never forget my first competitive laps of the circuit. The sights and sounds of all the exotic machinery were pure theatre. I had one of the best seats in the house, and it was all I could do to concentrate on my own race, which probably accounted for me coming in 1 lap ahead of the plan and taking the pit crew completely by surprise. But with deft teamwork, the driver change was completed on schedule, and Robert set out to post another batch of purple sectors. It was during this session that Robert achieved our best lap time of the race at 8 minutes 29 seconds, averaging 59.9 miles per hour, and also the high speed at 77.1 miles per hour. Little wonder that problems soon started to appear. On returning to the paddock, Robert reported that the brakes had deteriorated to the point of being unnerving, and a quick investigation revealed a broken front wheel bearing and a back axle oil leak, which was successfully lubricating both sets of brake shoes. Whilst Phil got to work on the necessary repairs, Robert and I agreed to treat the car with a bit more respect in order to try and finish with the car in one piece. Well, it sounded good anyway. The second outing was the night session, and by now the weather had deteriorated to the point where we wondered if the race might be stopped. In the event, the organisers decided to continue the race, but behind a pace car. Robert was first out for this session, and although he joined the pace car procession in pouring rain, it soon began to ease. Just before our scheduled driver change, the pace car came back in and we were back racing again. My stint started just as dawn was breaking at around 4:30 a.m. Although the conditions were challenging, I found the lightness of the car was an advantage on the wet track, and I was able to rein in some of the larger, quicker traffic, particularly on the twisty bits.
That's it, my boy. That's it. Yes, it is. Hey! Taking something. Right, okay, you'll be easy to spot.
I waited up all night for that.
I thought it was really right, 8 minutes, guys.
I thoroughly enjoyed the session and was happy with a best lap time of 9 minutes and 26 seconds. With the night session ended, I returned to the paddock and it was clear that all was not well again. Phil quickly established that the vertical camshaft drive had begun to chew up its retaining woodruff key. Having experienced this problem before, we knew it wasn't a quick fix. A discussion followed to decide whether to just limp the car home, but Phil wasn't happy to leave it to chance, so whilst he went to work, Robert and I sneaked an hour or so's kip. When I returned to the paddock a little later, the car was all ready for its final outing. For the final session, Robert and I agreed to exercise caution. Although the car was now running much better, with the end in sight, it made us realise how important it was to just finish. That carefully considered "let's just finish" plan went straight out the window the minute we were both back on track and the legendary red mist descended. The circuit was properly dry for the first time, and we were both enjoying this experience so much we conveniently forgot about the precautionary approach. The car was nowhere near as lively as it had been 24 hours earlier, but we managed some respectable and consistent lap times. When Robert returned the car to the paddock for the final time, the team shared an emotional moment, reflecting upon what we had achieved. Our team of Le Mans Classic first-timers had brought the car home in a creditable 39th position from a starting grid of 68 and 20th against the index of performance handicap. back to Race HQ, and the celebrations continued well into the early hours of Monday morning. Team M-Type returned to the UK on Tuesday, full of happy memories. Would we do it again? I honestly don't know. Watch this space come 2014. Enigmatic smile. Sorry.
Excellent.